to the first session on application and robotics. I mean, I believe this is the first session with papers from these two new special tracks, application and robotics. We have two full papers and two short papers, and the first paper will be presented by Nir and Christina.
Hi. So this paper is a joint work with Christina, myself, Adrian, who's here, and Peter Stuckey. And we're going to talk about planning operations in the context of, well, mining, basically. So first of all, before I show you, this is just one kind of problem that we can solve. But this benchmark, like if you look in mining operations, it's very rich to think about many possible planning problems or planning applications. So here is just one example of some kind of challenge that they have. So let me show you what is, for us, the open mining planning operations problem. So basically, we have a mine like that. It's a topology. You've got some blocks here. There's some material. You've got some crushers, which I'm not going to talk about in this presentation. But mainly, the idea is that you've got some loaders, that they move around. And there is some blocks, which is just slices of ore that they recognize that it's valuable, and it's been scheduled in order to be extracted. Okay, and this material have to go somewhere, and basically where it goes is to some stockpiles. And the stockpiles have a target in terms of the grade, meaning that you have to blend material, and it has to be on spec. And there are very different things that you look for: iron, phosphorus, but you've got some target that you have to achieve. And also there is a size. A stockpile has a certain maximum size and also a minimum size. And at the end, what you get is that the loader moves around, they dig the material, and they generate like a mining sequence where there are some constraints, resource constraints, that have to be met at certain points. Not always, but only at certain points. So the observations, we've got two players here, mainly the stockpiles, which are the ones imposing the resource constraints over the trajectories, and then we have the loader sequences that are actually doing two things. They are imposing the order in which you mine the blocks, and also they create new pathways. So basically, this is important because when you extract a block, you are maybe changing the distance into another block. Basically, you are creating new ways of reaching different blocks. So this has an effect on the final make span. So when do you finish? It has an effect on the stockpile blend because the order in which you mine means that this material will go to this stockpile that has to meet some specifications. And also the distance between the blocks change. Okay? You mine something, you clear your way, and then suddenly you have a new path. So given the state of the mine, which is where are the blocks, the topology, and where are the loaders located, the set of blocks that have to be mined, the task is to determine a feasible extraction sequence for the available excavators and trying to minimize the completion time. Okay? And which are the challenges here? First of all, there are state-dependent traversal times for the loaders because new pathways are created. Then we've got numerical variables for the blending constraints. And also we have actions with variable duration. And just to give an example, if you think about the digging action, so you want to tell to a loader, dig this block, you don't know how much you want to dig, and therefore you don't know how long you're going to be digging. So you don't know beforehand the duration of the actions. So the current approach is basically a human planner. Okay, when we went to the industry partner, actually when they talk about these people, they call them planners. So they are domain experts, there are very few of them, and they take a lot of time deciding. So basically trying to figure out how to come up with this sequencing and how to come up with this blend, the correct one. Normally, they fail a lot. So we started looking at this problem from the planning perspective, and we struggled with the blending constraints. We could not solve even very simple problems. And then from the MIP perspective, we struggle with the state-dependent traversal path. Okay? This fact that new pathways are created. So the contribution is a simple hybrid approach where we exploit the best part of the MIP and the best part of the temporal planners that we have. And the idea is that we want to create a tool in order to support these human planners to make better decisions on the fly. So be able to reason about the different ways that they can achieve whatever they're trying to achieve. So we make some assumptions. These assumptions, we didn't make them up for us to solve the problem, so there are practical assumptions on this specific mine. First, in order to access a block, if it has some adjacent blocks, you have to clear at least one, okay? Because otherwise you cannot go to this block. Then blocks might be split between different stockpiles, otherwise it's very hard to achieve the blending of the material. Then only one excavator may mine a block at any point. This is basically because you don't want two excavators crashing into each other, so it's safety. And then stockpiles are created sequentially. So a new stockpile cannot be started until the previous one is finished. And this is mainly due to space constraints. There is not enough space to build two stockpiles at the same time. So you can think about everything goes to a stockpile, is loaded into a train, and it disappears. Okay, and all of this is just how this specific mine works. So for the rest of the talk, Christina is going to give a mathematical program representing this problem. She's going to talk about the idea of the hybrid approach. I'll end up talking a little bit about how the temporal planning problems look like and the implementational results.
So to begin with, I'm going to give you a pictorial understanding of the mathematical program before I give you the actual mathematical program, so don't feel too intimidated. So to begin with, our objective function will be to minimize the make span, or the final task or final activity that's performed by the loaders. The block set that we're given will be handed down from a higher order schedule, and our first constraint will be to mine every single block that we've been told that we have to mine. Our second constraint will be to create the stockpiles, and these stockpiles have to be a particular size. This is dictated by the size of the trains that take away the ore. The third constraint is again on the stockpiles, and this is on the grade of the iron in the stockpiles. So there'll be a minimum and a maximum on the iron content. The next constraint will be a set of precedence constraints, and these are natural constraints that you can't get to a block unless you've mined the blocks in front of it. And finally, there'll be a set of loader sequencing constraints. This is in a mathematical program, this would actually not be one constraint, this would be a whole set of constraints, something like a multi-commodity network flow. But in the context of this talk, we can consider it to be one set of constraints. So as a mathematical program, first I'll explain the variables and then show you how these constraints map back to the picture that I just described. So our first variable will be omega, and that will be our make span. Our second variable will be xbd, which will be the proportion of block B, which will be allocated to stockpile D. And that's, in the simple version, that's as hard as it gets. So our objective will be to minimize the make span. Our first constraint will be to make sure that we mine the complete block, so that every block is allocated completely to throughout all of the stockpiles. This second constraint is the demand. If we consider CB to be the capacity or the size of block B, we need all of the parts that we send to stockpile D to be between the upper and lower bounds, which is dictated by the train size. Similarly, if we consider GB to be the grade of the ore that's in a particular block, we require all of the ore that we've sent to a particular stockpile to conform to these upper and lower bounds on the grade. Just to make things simple, we've got here the set constraint set B will be the precedence constraints. It's not particularly important for this talk, and the constraint set C will be the loader sequencing constraints. And one key thing to notice here is that the loader sequencing constraints involve other variables that are not in the rest of this math program, and they'll be the make span, start and finish times for particular activities for particular loaders. So now I want to describe the method that we came up with. So the simplest thing you could possibly think of would be to partition this problem, decompose this problem into the part that is easily solvable by a mixed integer program and the part that's easily solvable by a planner. The very first published linear program was actually a blending problem. So what we aim to do is solve all of the allocation problem and the blending problem with a mixed integer program and the remaining planning problem with a planner. But we'd like to do this in a slightly more intelligent way, and that's what we aim to do. So how do we do this? We have this decomposition approach, at least in the mathematical programming community. We like to have some kind of feedback between the two decompositions. In general, this is called Bender's decomposition, but so far we haven't found a good mechanism for having a feedback from planning. It's possible to have weak, no good cuts, but we haven't found a way to have strong, no good cuts yet. So in our method, we're going to imitate a Bender's decomposition approach by creating an easy-to-solve approximation for the second partition, the loader sequencing problem, and embedding that within the first partition. We can solve that first partition with the approximation, pass the solution to the second partition, and then solve for a feasible sequence. So it should be clear that if we get a solution to the second partition, that it will be feasible for the entire problem. I also wanted to note that we have constructed our partitions in such a way that every solution that we pass from P1 to P2 is also guaranteeing feasibility in P2, which is very important for our industry partner. Okay, so the method again in pictures. We start with our first partition, which is just the allocation and blending problem. We want to create an approximation that's easy to solve, and in mixed integer programming, this means not adding very complex constraints, but it can also mean not adding very new variables. So we try to represent the approximation with variables that are already in the first partition. So we add this approximation to the first partition. This gives us our new partition H1. We solve that partition. We fix all of the variables from the first partition and pass that to the second partition and solve that one. So that will give us a feasible solution. It's guaranteed to give us a feasible solution for the problem. So this just leaves us with the problem of knowing how do we approximate the sequence for H1. So to describe this, if we imagine that we have 3 excavators, and each of these excavators are given a task, and this is the duration of the task, then the make span for the stockpile would be at the last moment that a task is completed. So you can see here that because we can't start the next stockpile until all of the tasks are completed, some of the excavators are waiting around, and one would expect that this is going to contribute to a longer make span. So our aim will be to minimise the waiting time for loaders. And we interpreted this to mean we want to minimise the deviation between the workload that we allocate to the loaders. We want their workloads to be as similar as possible. So to capture this in our math program, we create ancillary variables which capture the deviation between the workloads that we allocate to all of the loaders. So we do need to consider every pair of loaders that are in the set, where these are the jobs that we expect those loaders to do. Now remember that we don't actually have any variables relating to loaders in the first partition, so we need to estimate what this loader set PL will be. And we do this in a very simple way. We just create a fair division scheme. You can think of it as an auction, where each excavator has an equal opportunity to place a bid on a block that it would like to mine. And we choose the blocks based on the shortest path. If that block is available, the loader wins that block, and we continue on in this way until all of the blocks are allocated. It's a very simple approach, but very effective. So we end up with all of these deviations between all of the workload allocations. We want to minimize the maximum deviation in each stockpile. So that gives us another ancillary variable here, rho, and our objective function will then be to minimize these bottleneck variables. So to see if this method is actually effective, there's two things that we would want to see. First, what is the effect of just sticking the solution to partition 1 into partition 2? And the second way would be to have a complete solution to the problem. Unfortunately, we don't have a complete solution to the problem because of the state-dependent component, but in our experiments we'll be able to show you this comparison.
Okay, so which is the idea? Given the solution of the first partition, can be P1 or H1, we take the amount of each block that has to be mined for each stockpile. Okay, and now the benefits are the following. First, we know the durations. So durations now are static. We know how much we're going to dig, so we know how much it's going to take for each loader. Then there is no need to reason about numerical variables. We know that the constraints over the blends are going to be met because that's taken care of on P1 or H1. And then we can further decompose the assumption that we can only do one stockpile at any time, and we solve a stockpile one by one, and then we just sequence the plans for each stockpile. And so what is the planning problem? Actually, given the tons that have to be mined in this current stockpile, okay, this is a planning problem for a stockpile, and the distances, the topology, we've got a set of fluents describing where the blocks can be located, where the loaders can be located, and which are the blocks that we have to mine. Then we describe where actually these blocks initially are, and the loaders the same. We have some digging action that now has a static duration. We have some move actions that take into account which blocks have been mined so far. And then the goal is to mine everything that has been marked to be just mined and assigned here in this stockpile to get the right blending. So you can see that there's nothing numerical here, which is much better for the current technology. So the solution for each stockpile, you just sequentialize it, and you have a solution for the whole problem. So we solved the first part using Cplex. The second part, we use the latest version of POP-F, a suboptimal planner, and CPT, which is an optimal planner. The number of blocks, we took like 5 real case scenarios from the industrial partner. It can go from 1 week to 3 weeks, which is 22 to 75 blocks. The size of the blocks, the range is very different, and the same about the grade. So you can go from waste almost to something very good. And we also generated synthetic benchmarks that we're not going to talk here, but there's more information in the paper. So the results, here you have the 5 instances. The last one is the one of 3 weeks. P1 slash or whatever is first means the P1, the naive MIP, and the H means the MIP that has the approximation also. And then you've got if either is a suboptimal planner or optimal planner. Above, plan length, in parentheses, make span, and then below the computation time of the MIP, in parentheses, and of the planner. Interesting things that you can see. So the MIP is very fast. The planner, so there's nothing surprising. The suboptimal planner, it's much faster than the optimal planner. The HS column is just like the MIP solver with a special constraint SOS2, which what it does is that enforces that if you partition a block, you're gonna finish it in the next one. Okay, so if you partition it, it has to be between adjacent stockpiles. The nice result here, though, something that we expected to see. So if we solve the heuristic MIP, we should get better make span, which means that the MIP is slicing the space where the planner is searching and is putting the planner in a better space. Okay, and something which was very good for us at least is that using this heuristic approach where we approximate where do we want to put the planner, not just randomly, we can use a suboptimal planner and still get better solutions than using an optimal planner without the approximation. Okay, and you can see that here it took us 2 seconds to find a better solution than using an optimal planner. So the main message here is that this is a very challenging problem for both technologies. This is just an approach, a hybrid approach that can be applied for different problems. We tried it, it also works. The key issue is how do you approximate the second problem? And the outcome is that if you do it, you can have a maybe more naive solver that actually scales up, that can get a better solution than just trying to have two very strong solvers independently. So future work, there are many things that we have to account for, tracks, cross utilization. So if you try to maximize always the feed rate, then the problems change completely, and well, we are working on it. And the idea is that the industrial partner is very interested in having a tool in order to reason about the things that he's not taking into account, such as further blocks that maybe they render much better utilization of the equipment, etc. So that's it pretty much. Thanks.
Yeah, so time for questions.
Sorry, very nice work, thanks. Going back to the assignment of, I think it was excavators to blocks, but I'm not sure. Oh, geez, I got it. So you do it in a kind of incremental way. So if an excavator bids for a block, then it is assigned this block, or it is run in kind of market clearing prices way. What I'm trying to say is that if you assign blocks to excavators one by one in an incremental fashion, it is very, very, very suboptimal. And there is a very nice procedure for obtaining kind of balanced assignment, which is based on this iterative algorithm for designing market clearing prices. So think of, I start with, so price in that case for a block will correspond to an upper bound on the shortest path. And then everybody that can get to this block in the shortest path bid for it. Oh, so now many bid for it. Now we reduce this upper bound, and these excavators will drop by bound one. And there's a nice theorem that there are always market clearing prices, et cetera, et cetera. So you may consider that for getting better solutions.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks.
So, any other question?
Oh, thanks.
Hello. I'm just wondering I'm curious as to what features of PDDL you need in your temporal planning problem.
Which features we used here?
Yes, so you used pop-ups, so I presume you did so because you needed a lot of features. So what features are you?
Yeah, basically we needed to be able to have the blocks running at the same, the loaders running at the same time and ensuring that they don't collide, and that whenever they clear something, they can take into account that new pathways are created. So in a sense, we needed some kind of computer in a parallel plan.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
So just a clarification to that. So is there actually required concurrency in the problem, or is it a temporal problem that can be, in theory, sequentialized and then scheduled?
I believe that it can be, yeah.
Except for the stop clock.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, let's thank the speaker again.